Joining me now to help answer that question and others is Republican Congressman from Florida, Byron Donalds, a supporter of the former president. Congressman Donalds, I appreciate your being with us on Meet the Press now. Why is former President Trump and the Republican Party so concerned right now with Nikki Haley getting out of the race immediately?
I don't think it's a matter of concern. I think it's just more a matter of the fact that everybody knows what's about to happen. Nikki Haley's going to lose in Nevada. She's going to lose in South Carolina. She's going to lose in North Carolina, in Florida on Super Tuesday. That's going to happen. If you look back at what happened last night in New Hampshire, the vast majority of votes she received were from Democrats who were undeclared in the New Hampshire primary. That's not going to translate in the rest of this campaign. And so a lot of Republican voters, including party leadership and the president, are a little frustrated because we all know what's about to happen. There is no pathway. And the only pathway that really exists for her campaign right now is if the donors continue to fund it. But it's not going to happen at the ballot box.
Well, let me ask you about those independents then, if I can, really quickly. There have obviously been some warning signs for the former president, some of which we saw last night. You got moderate Republicans who have spoken out against Donald Trump, supported Nikki Haley. You have some independents who supported Nikki Haley as well. Here's what two registered Republicans told us. Take a listen.
I think Mr. Trump's going to be too preoccupied with other things, unfortunately. So.
And have you voted for President Trump in the past?
Yes.
And so this time, tell me why you decided to switch this time. Expand a little bit more on that.
I just think he's going to be spending too much time protecting himself, arguing, fighting, and there's too many problems in this country, and people are just brushing them behind them, and things need to get addressed.
So to be clear, those are registered Republicans speaking there. How does he win the general election without voters like those?
Well, look, the key thing is a general election. When you're in a primary, Republicans have an opportunity to make a myriad of choices. If you've actually seen through our presidential contest, the Republican Party has a ton of talent, and we're actually not afraid to have our talent on stage. Contrast that with the Democrat Party. They won't even let Dean Phillips appear on the ballot in many states because they're afraid of having Joe Biden actually answer a Democrat within their own party.
Respectfully, though, if you're not afraid
to the general election.
Sorry, finish your thought.
But when you move to the general election, it's going to be a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Who did a better job? And it is without question that Donald Trump did a better job as commander-in-chief of our country and leader of our government. And so I think that those voters and independent voters and even some conservative Democrats are going to compare these two men and realize that Donald Trump not only is more fit to be president of the United States, but he did a significantly better job than Joe Biden has done.
But sir, the risk as much as anything, and I've heard this from Republicans, is that some of those moderate Republicans, some of them never Trumpers, some of those independents who showed up last night just choose not to show up at all this fall. And if you lose a Republican or an independent that you think you would have needed to get, that ends up being as bad as not getting the vote at all.
See, actually, I don't think that's going to happen because, again, elections are about choices. They always are.
But, sir, 68% of these independents yesterday told the AP that the independents, they said that they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. End of story. That's in New Hampshire, a key state.
Look, New Hampshire is an important state. Every state's an important state, but we know where the real battle lines are going to be drawn in the presidential cycle. Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. And if you look at polling, the top two issues in America are the economy and the border. And Joe Biden has been a disaster on both of those fronts. And don't even get started on foreign policy, where the world, frankly, is dealing with some serious geopolitical issues because of the weakness of Joe Biden. That was not the case when Donald Trump was president. So I think as these campaigns evolve, you give the Trump campaign an opportunity to have its message be heard in a general election environment, and people make that compare and contrast. Now you're dealing with two men who have been president, something that's very rare in American politics. My belief and the campaign's belief is those independent voters and even some of those soft Democrat, conservative Democrat voters will choose President Trump.
We don't need to dive into the economy now, but you know as well as anybody that the Dow and the S&P have now hit record highs after former President Trump during the last campaign said they would plummet beneath Joe Biden. I know inflation remains too high for too many Americans, but I do want to ask you specifically, which version of Donald Trump do you want to see heading into South Carolina and the rest of the election? The Trump we saw after Iowa who called for unity, or the Trump we saw Monday who went after Nikki Haley?
Well, real quick, the stock market, yes, all-time high, but that doesn't impact working families in this country. It's not impacting poor families in their country. They are looking at the price of food, the price of gas, and Joe Biden. Really important is going to be that Donald Trump shows the voters of our party that he's going to fight for them. Look, primary contests, they get messy. This is par for the course. Happens all the time. But Donald Trump has not taken his eye off the ball, which is making sure that there is an agenda that puts the American people first. That's what he's going to be committed to. That's always going to be the focus of the campaign. These little things that happen between candidates, they happen all the time. Not a big deal, because what the American people truly need is leadership in the White House once again.
There is a proposal, as you know, in the Florida House to use taxpayer dollars to help pay Mr. Trump's legal bills. Governor DeSantis, the Republican governor in that state, says he would veto it. What do you think of that proposal?
I'm actually not aware of the proposal. I heard something about what the governor was saying, but I haven't studied it, so I'm not going to comment. Listen,
as a former member of the Florida House, hold on. Let me
say this. As a former member of the Florida House, bills get filed all the times, and it's actually irresponsible to comment on them without having had an opportunity to review the legislation. But let me add this. President Trump is under fire from the Department of Justice. This is politically motivated by the Department of Justice, and I will also add Fannie Willis in Georgia. And you could tell how political this is, where Jack Smith and Fannie Willis won a speedy trial. A speedy trial is not for the government. It's actually for the defendant. It's for the defendant if they desire to have a speedy trial. When the government tries to move very quickly because they want to get a conviction, usually it's because the government is up to no good. We've seen that time and time again in our country, and it is without question that the Department of Justice is playing politics of the worst kind. That is very un-American, and that's the type of attitude and actions that destroy our institutions and our republic.
Just to be clear, there's no evidence right now that there has been any conversations between the Department of Justice and Joe Biden on this. Obviously, Donald Trump was indicted by a grand jury.
This is an important point that you bring up, because this is an important point that you bring up now, because you have the prosecutor in Atlanta who billed Fannie Willis and actually was meeting with the White House counsel in D.C.
And that case is going to play out in a courtroom, so there's equal justice for both sides. If they determine that she's guilty for that, she'll be held responsible.
These are important questions that need to be asked. That's all we're saying. But one thing is crystal clear. We've never seen anything like this, where the law has been stretched and twisted just to get your political opponent.
Congressman Byron Donalds, we appreciate you making time to speak to us. Thank you very much.